So AI scribing really kind of comes into two different buckets. We have dictation, which is kind of the older way of doing things, which is after the appointment, you're speaking into a recording device and it's writing down everything that you're saying as is. And this is very similar to the dictation mode that's on your phone when you talk and it just says everything verbatim. There's a newer version of scribing though, which is really what all the hype has been about. And this is called full appointment scribing. And so this is typically the full appointment. It could be 20 to 40 minutes, well up to 2 hours at times, but it's taking the full appointment. And there's a heavy level of summarization that's taking place through the AI. What it's doing is it's trying to match and format the note into the style that the doctor is expecting. So at the end of the day, the doctor is basically able to send audio recordings and they receive back a fully done medical record, which maybe some editing is required. So when we think about accuracy inside of scribing, it's of course very important. And I've probably set a foundation, which is the nice thing about scribing, especially when it comes to generative AI, is that the doctor is not blindly dependent on these tools, which is a very important thing when you're thinking about how to launch generative AI tools. You need to know how much the doctor needs to rely on these tools just right out the gate and blindly. So the nice thing about scribing is you don't actually have that high of a dependency. The doctor goes in, does the appointment, they come out and they're looking at this medical record of the appointment they just did. So they do have this full context, which is nice. But we still really want to make sure that these notes are as accurate as possible so the doctor is not having to do a lot of corrections. But what does accuracy really mean? And for us, the way that we look at this from a AI lens is we think of terms of things in false positives and false negatives. And sometimes we call this AI overinterpretation or AI underinterpretation. So for example, if the doctor says we're ruling out diabetes, does diabetes show up on the medical record? Or and if it doesn't, why not? And so what we're really wanting to assess here is how well is the AI scribe responding to what the doctor says? And the reality is we usually don't just see things in black and white. The doctor doesn't just say, yes, this is true, or yes, this is not there, or no, this is not there. What we usually find is a lot of grays. It's likely that this could take place, or it's unlikely that this can take place. And the AI has to do a bit of an interpretation. Does that unlikely mean that we shouldn't be adding this to the medical record? Or does saying that it's likely, does that mean we should add it to the medical record? There's a lot of clinical intuition that goes into how to interpret what a doctor is saying, and these AI systems do not inherently have that. So when you're talking to a provider that will be providing scribing services for you, it's really important to really drill down and ask those questions. How do they handle their false positives? How do they handle their false negatives? How do they turn those dials to determine how sensitive the AI should be to what you're saying? All these AI systems operate differently and they're all built slightly differently. And so what you really need to do is drill down with the scribing company to say, how do you handle these specific circumstances? Because each one's going to handle it differently. And as the doctor, it would be best to make sure that it's in alignment with how you do your medicine. The three big questions that I would try to dive in on, and this is coming also from the Vic AI task force and the subcommittee that was there analyzing all the different scribing companies. First and foremost, look into the team. At the end of the day, most of these scribing services are coming out through many different startups, and even the bigger companies that are launching them have usually typically fairly small teams working on them. So we would ask, look at that team. Do they have the proper domain expertise? Do they have veterinarians on staff? Were those who are those veterinarians that are helping guide and assess these products that are being built? And then on the AI side, we'd recommend looking in and making sure that these teams that are launching these scribing products have true AI professionals working on them. There's many kind of fly-by-night solutions that have been coming out where there are companies that launch that do not have veterinarians on their team, nor do they have AI professionals on their team. Ask. Both of these degrees are graduate work level degrees. When you get your DVM, that is a graduate work level degree. When you get your degree in artificial intelligence, it could also be called applied mathematics or a version of computer science. These are all graduate level degrees. Ask and ensure that the teams that you're working with have those types of backgrounds, because this is very important because it drives the second dimension, which is accuracy. We want to make sure that these systems are as accurate as possible, because at the end of the day, even if you are adopting a scribing solution, you as the practitioner are liable and reliable for that final medical record. So we don't recommend blindly trusting these. So you want to have a solution that's highly accurate so you're not having to do as much editing, and it makes your life easier and also reduce a lot of that liability there. And then kind of finally, we'd really recommend checking in and making sure that the data privacy and data security is in line with what you're expecting. And to kind of help set an expectation, the generative AI and artificial intelligence is a newer technology, but it is deployed on older technology that has been around for a while. So if you've been okay with the data privacy and the data security, nothing much has changed on that front. But if you have been uncertain about that, or if you've been nervous about that, it's still reasonable to be concerned and nervous about that. With that said, on the data privacy front, this is generally an internal policy that many of these companies are setting. Who can access the medical records? When can they access the medical records? And we recommend asking. These are policies these companies set, whether they're big or small, and you should just be able to ask the company directly, what is your policy on X, Y, and Z when it comes to privacy? And this is, since it's a policy, they have full control over it. Now, on the data security side, many times this is much more, it gets pretty technical pretty quick, but the important part of this is, do they have the team in place to be able to launch a secure data product? And really that just comes to making sure that you have strong technologists on the team. So just make sure to ask who's launching your tech products. And, if they have a number of years of background in the space, that's many times you could rest assured that they're an individual that can be trusted to do that. But if they don't have a technical founder, if they don't have a technical team member, you may want to be weary of such launches. So, and not all teams have them. So I would definitely ask. I would say feel free to reach out to me or the team at PupPilot to ask any questions. We love fielding these. And also the Vic AI Task Force is set up to help practitioners be able to help navigate these waters. So whether it's scribing or AI radiology and many other topics, we are out there looking out on the practitioner's behalf, and we come out with a lot of different resources. We have the Vic two-pager on scribing and the accompanying questions. We highly recommend looking at the questions list. The questions are questions that we believe that you, the practitioner, should ask these scribing companies before you start engaging with them. The questions are there just so that you make sure that you have proper alignment with the scribing company that you choose to use. And the questions that we have also have expected answers so that you have a gauge of what to expect to hear from these companies. And in addition, if you ever want to do a very deep dive of how to do the proper assessment of something like scribing, we also have a paper called Maps for Bears, and that Maps for Bears paper is a very large technical deep dive into the inner workings of scribing, how it works, how to assess it, because scribing at the end of the day is a pretty varied input and a pretty varied output. And it's a very unique way that we do this type of assessment inside of generative AI. And the paper is inspired by Stanford's Helm project. And I could get into more of that, but that's the kind of high level. My relationship with the Vic AI Task Force is I head the subcommittee on scribing. So PupPilot is a generative AI infrastructure layer for anyone that is looking to build generative AI applications inside of VetMed. So we work with software engineering teams and product teams to make sure that they're launching and accurately being able to use generative AI. We have what's called a RAG optimization layer that makes sure that anything that that's being used inside of generative AI is calling on and using domain expertise that exists. We're searching for that, finding that, and then using that in all of our products, whether we're doing extractions over PDFs or scribing or using a chatbot. We have this RAG layer across all of our different products so that they all come back with highly accurate answers, and then that's provided as an endpoint for any of the teams that want those things built to have them built. And we also help with like custom builds if you want deeper integration to your own data.